Run along here, Locked On SEC, Locked On Auburn. Our guy Zac Blackerby joining us here on the show. Zac, welcome in. Happy holidays to you and your own. And man, you got to wonder if Auburn's going to have a big fat gift under the tree this holiday season, looking for their next quarterback. A lot of momentum kind of building around Byrum Brown. What'd you make of the news a couple days ago when the USF quarterback officially announced he was entering the portal?
Yeah, I was wondering when it was going to come out. I mean, Byrum Brown had been linked to Auburn since the moment Alex Golesh took Auburn's head coaching job. It was like, okay, well, like who did he have? And obviously, Alex Golesh and Byrum Brown had a lot of success together, specifically last year, to the point where when Auburn put out their press release of, hey, we're officially hiring Alex Golesh, there were like 3 paragraphs of the press release that were about what Byrum Brown did under Golesh last year. Extremely productive at South Florida. So obviously the question then turns to, okay, what happens with the guys that are currently in the quarterback room? And we've heard now from Jackson Arnold, which is no surprise. And then Ashton Daniels, this past weekend, we heard about that. So then it comes down to, the discussion about Deuce and Byrum Brown, or Deuce and a transfer portal quarterback. It's going to be an interesting dynamic for sure. I think a lot of fans are dealing in absolutes. If this happens, then this guy leaves, or vice versa. And I think it's more complex than that. I don't think it's quite that simple. But that's been the biggest chatter on the Auburn side of things, with Auburn's quarterback room under Alex Golesh.
Yeah, it's a tough battle too, right? I mean, we saw Deuce Knight, in minimal action, and then he gets that start at the end of the year and looks fantastic. I mean, particularly his running ability and all that. And we know what a freak athlete he is. And so it becomes, if you're an Auburn fan, do you want to commit to the young guy who's the freak athlete that has the high upside, but still might go through his growing pains in 2026, versus the proven commodity, the known Byrum Brown, a 4-year starter at USF, who, is older, mature, and can win now. And so that's the tough battle, I think, if you're an Auburn fan. What are most of the fans saying?
Yeah, I would say it's probably pretty close to split, Gordy, which is a little interesting. And I think both sides have a pretty strong argument. I mean, like you said, we saw the upside with Deuce Knight, and yes, it was against Mercer, but goodness gracious, like eye test, he checks all the boxes as far as physical stature, physical ability. And I think he's a pro, right? I think he's a guy that you could see lead an SEC offense to success. Then, like you said, Byrum Brown, he is the production. And I'm personally on the side of it where I'm kind of over talking about upside at Auburn. Give me a guy who can win right away. Give me the proven commodity. And I know folks are going to say, well, he did it in the AAC. This is the SEC. It's like, well, he looked pretty good against Miami, much better than Marcel Reed did this past weekend against Miami. And then obviously he went and had a great game against Florida, including, a game-clinching drive there at the end. So I do think Byrum Brown will transition just fine to the SEC. We've seen that a lot in this transfer portal era. And I think him following Golesh and being in that same system, I think it even makes that move potentially even safer. So it's probably split down the middle, but for what it's worth, if you don't get Byrum Brown and Deuce Knight as your starter, I think Auburn's still in a good situation. But if I had to pick, bring in Byrum Brown.
Yeah, I've watched a good bit of USF games the last couple of years. I think I mentioned our niece.
You got family in there, right?
Yeah, cheerleader there. And so we've watched a lot of the games, and my wife's been to a bunch of the games. And, it almost felt like that was a marriage there between Alex Golesh and Byrum Brown. Like they worked hand in hand together, and how they, okay, 4th and short, we know we're going for this. He looks to the sidelines, boom, they're going. And so you almost wonder if those conversations were had. And I know it happened very quickly with Golesh, right? Like it was bing, bang, boom. Auburn offered, we're going. Because Arkansas had talks with him and all that. But I almost wonder if he had those preliminary talks with Byrum Brown. Hey, bud, just a heads up. If we can take this job to Auburn, we'd love to have you there. Because they were very quick, Zach, USF, to come out, their AD, and put out a statement saying, we are negotiating with Byrum Brown talking about his future and all that. So you got to think they made him a pretty lucrative offer. For him to still enter the portal probably means there's better offers out there, and you got to think Auburn is in the mix there.
Yeah, and once again, anytime there's a portal window, I say it a ton on your show. I'm sure you say something similar on Locked On SEC, Gordy, but there's a million reasons why a kid can enter the portal. And I think most fans gravitate towards money first, and there's nothing wrong with leaving for a better job that's paying you more. We all do it in the professional world all the time. There's nothing wrong with it. And players almost want to hide. Oh, it's not all about the money. I'm like, yeah, in some cases it is, and that's okay. That's okay. Is that what it is for Byrum Brown? Because if it comes down to like who's going to pay him the most, like, I don't think it's Auburn. I think other places would be willing to pay him more. As we sit and have this conversation, he's the 3rd ranked transfer portal quarterback according to On3. But if you're Byrum Brown, I mean, we talked about it from the Auburn point of view, from the player point of view. Like, some of this is you want to mitigate risk, and if you follow your head coach, a guy who you guys can finish each other's sentences. That to me seems like something that would be a no-brainer for a guy like Byrum Brown. But we never fully know why guys enter the portal and what's most important to them. And whatever is most important to them is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. Fans want to bash it. But if he wants to win and wants to continue winning under Alex Golesh, I do think him following Golesh to Auburn should be. I think it would make sense for it to be high on his list of priorities.
And doesn't it, just knowing his game and watching his game, it feels like Auburn's at its best when it's got a dual threat quarterback back there. But doesn't it feel like in this day and age with the game, you got to have a mobile quarterback now? Like, it just feels like, gone are the days. Look at what Garrett Nussmeier did this year. It's a statue back there just getting killed. Like, you got to be able to have that dual threat. And it just feels like that it would be a perfect fit with the Auburn culture. And of course, knowing Golesh so well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, you'd rather have a quarterback that can throw and run than just throw, of course. And it's probably always been that way. They're just way more
just
common.
run like Jackson Arnold,
Yeah, yeah, and I think, right, and I think there's a deeper conversation there about like where football has gone. I think you're even seeing it at the NFL level to some extent. Like, you've seen the clips of Phillip Rivers over the past week, like actually like calling plays and reading a defense, and like, oh, this is like. They developed quarterbacks differently back then than they do now. And I think with this urgency you have to win right away, you get no time anymore. And obviously that's the case at Auburn. That's the case everywhere. You have to win right away. And so I do think getting an athletic quarterback allows some of these guys to not have to be coached and taught as much, because that's such a key part of their game.
Continue our conversation with Zac Blackerby, Locked On Auburn. And Zach, I wanted to talk. We spent a good bit on Byrum Brown and the quarterback. I want to talk about this mass exodus, because it just feels like every time I open up my Twitter timeline is another Auburn player entering the portal. And look, I get it. Attrition's going to happen when you make a coaching change. It's going to happen. New coaching staff comes in, you're going to lose a lot of those players. But this is going to be a very different looking Auburn team. Talk to a little bit of some of the guys that have left and who that's gone or planning to enter the portal. Who of those names do you think raised the biggest red flag in your mind? Like, oh, we're going to lose that guy?
Yeah, this is definitely the byproduct of a few things happening at once, Gordy, and they all needed to happen. Obviously, moving on from Hugh Freeze and the majority of a coaching staff that brought all these guys in. And then also a dedication to change a culture that has been a culture of losing at Auburn for the last 2 regimes now, and for maybe even the last year or 2 of Gus Malzahn's era. So I think you're trying to do 2 things at once, and this is what that looks like. As far as names that are most impactful, Amaris Williams leaving is certainly going to be impactful on the field, but this is, I mean, he entered the portal last year, and DJ Durkin had to pull him back out of the portal and convince him to stay. We heard similar things about some of the defensive backs that we've talked about. You got the top of the list there, Kayin Lee and Jay Crawford. Obviously those guys are good players. I'm probably the biggest fan of Jay Crawford of anyone that is not related to Jay Crawford, but when you hear some of these numbers being thrown around and what Auburn is probably going to be able to do as far as replacing these guys in the portal, I think it makes sense. I think it makes sense. There's been some really solid reporting by members of the Auburn media about the shift in approach to NIL deals at Auburn. They're not going to be front loaded anymore, or as front loaded as they were. And they're going to be more incentive based. They want you to stick around. They want you to earn it. And that's going to excite some people, and it's going to turn some people away. And just talking to, players and family members of players and people that are close to some of these players that were on that list that you just showed, direct quote is, you can't do that to a junior that's been here for 3 years and just change it. You can't just do that. I'm like, well, you can if you want to change a culture. And like, he knows that these guys are going to leave if he does that. Like, so clearly he must be okay with it. So they're trying to do something different. We'll see. We'll see if it works. And honestly, Gordy, I'm at the point where if it's something that Hugh Freeze didn't do, I'm fine with it. Just do the opposite, because it did not work.
It's a fascinating realm to move into. And this kind of goes back to what the Louisiana governor went viral for a couple weeks ago, saying we're paying all these coaches these massive $1 million buyouts. How about we change the premise of these contracts to go, hey, more incentive laden. You have success on the field, you get more money. And it almost feels like Auburn's saying the same thing with the players, going, hey, why are we paying a $2 million for a 17-year-old who's never played a down of college football before, or a guy who was a backup at UTEP who's never done it in the SEC? How about we make it incentive laden? I'd love to see a shift go more towards that, Zach, because I heard our guy Matt Moscona talking about there was a kid from Louisiana that wanted to go to LSU, but USC paid him $2 million. He went there and barely played, and it's like, what is USC getting for that $2 million? You're getting nothing, and it's like, the money's fine, paying the players is fine, but it can't be you got paid and you don't have to do anything for it. Like it needs to be a little bit more like, hey, if you play and you're good, you get even more money.
Yeah. NIL was originally, designed to be an exchange of goods and services, and that's not really what's happening. Anything other than that is pay to play. I think you're seeing that, and you could do that with the rev share stuff, but the NIL aspect of it, it's interesting. It's certainly interesting. Yeah, and I mean, I think that's what Auburn ran into with the lack of retention. Is they were paying these young guys starter money, and they haven't been starters before, obviously. And so now when it's their time to start, they still don't have any legit experience. They've got rotational experience, but it's experience as a starter. It's like, well, why should we pay you for that when you haven't done that yet? But also, that they're going to leave if you do that, which tells me that Alex Golesh and the staff, they were ready for this. They're okay with this, and we'll see how they respond when the portal opens on January 2nd.
Last thing for you, we showed the graphic of all the wide receivers. Malcolm Simmons, Horatio Fields, Perry Thompson. Of course, Simmons and Thompson were two of those big signees from that Hugh Freeze class.
Four.
Yeah. The two big names I think obviously everybody's got eyes on. Eric Singleton, the transfer from Georgia Tech, who came over, and I think a lot of people are hoping he sticks around and will be a senior and big-time playmaker. And then the other one is Cam Coleman, who was the highly touted 5-star freshman that, coming off for a nice sophomore year for all things considered, when they barely could throw him the football a lot of times. But is that priority one? I mean, as of this recording, he's not made any kind of announcement yet, but to me, that just feels like the one you got to pay him no matter what it takes to keep.
Yeah, that's certainly the feeling, is you got to pay Cam Coleman no matter what. And then I asked the question, there's got to be a point where it's too much, right? Like, how much is, let's say he has a really solid year, and this would be arguably the best year of a receiver at Auburn history. If he got 1,200 yards in this Alex Golesh offense, is that worth potentially a 10th of your cap? I don't know. I asked that to somebody who's in the know. They're like, what if he's a first round draft pick? And I'm like, yeah, I could have that impact. Sure. But that's a lot of money. And I'm not saying he's not worth it, but I think that's a question that Alex Golesh and his crew have to decide, because some of the money that is coming in for Cam Coleman, and it's been this way, it was this way last offseason too, folks trying to lure him into the portal. If he wants money, it's going to be there. No question about it. So we'll see. As long as there's no news, as we record this on the 23rd, no news is good news, but that could change literally in a phone call. So we'll see. Eric Singleton's interesting because I kind of spent all year assuming he was going to go pro. And then there's a lot of chatter of, oh, can Auburn hold on to him? And that seems to be pretty real. And I think this is one where Auburn has had some NIL partners potentially step in to keep him at Auburn. And I think this would be a very public campaign if that were to happen. So we'll see what that looks like. But I mean, I had a phone call yesterday with somebody saying like he's still waiting for his draft grade. I mean, Eric Singleton got first and second round grades going into the season. Did he show traits, not production, but traits that proved that wrong this year? And I would say that he did not. I don't think he did anything from a trait standpoint to hurt his stock, but the lack of production, how's the NFL going to feel about that? I think that's going to be super intriguing.
Yeah, what's interesting is Auburn and obviously a lot of inconsistencies in the passing game this year with Jackson Arnold and then, changing up of quarterbacks. But when you look at it, only two receivers had more than 26 catches this year. It was Eric Singleton and Cam Coleman. When I look at South Florida last year, you had four different receivers with 23 or more catches. Keyshawn Singleton, Jeremiah Coger, Ruben, and Chaz Nimrod, of course, who came over from Tennessee. Christian Neptune as well. So they had a bunch of guys where they spread the ball around. I just bring that up because Byrum Brown and Alex Golesh's philosophy, will it be more, hey, Cam, you're going to get yours, but we want everybody to eat in this offense.
Yeah. He really, the only time he had that elite receiver at this level was Jalen Hyatt at Tennessee. And he had a great season and he was drafted high. And, there was, all of that excitement that went with Tennessee that season, arguably the best offense in college football that year. Is that what he's pitching to Cam Coleman, or is it different? They seem like different type of receivers to me. So like, how does that impact it? And like the list of receivers that you put up on there that were leaving, like it sounds like the conversation with Perry Thompson and the conversation with Horatio Fields, which I think will be two guys that get plenty of attention in the portal, rightfully so, for different reasons. It sounds like that was like a scheme fit. Like, I don't think Golesh was like begging to keep those guys based off of the folks that I talked to, which is a little interesting, but also like, I'm glad that he's got a specific plan. And I'm not entirely sure this is going to be a big pivot because I think the previous regime, they saw a high recruiting ranking and they're like, we're going to go get that guy. He must be good. I think Golesh and crew are going to rely on their own scouting for how it fits their system, not necessarily just like, how does this look in the recruiting rankings? In his second presser that he had, he was asked, are you anticipating a bunch of top 10 classes here? And he's like, that's an interesting question. And I'm glad you asked that because obviously you want to get top 10 classes, but who's ranking like what those top 10 classes look like? They don't, with y'all's websites, they don't rank as far as how they fit a specific scheme and what we see. Now, obviously, there's going to be times where those overlap, but they may not overlap. So we have to bring in what fits us, not necessarily like if somebody has, an extra star next to their name or not, which I thought was intriguing. And that's going to apply to the transfer portal, right? I mean, that's what something Hugh Freeze did was, okay, so-and-so is the top offensive tackle. We need offensive tackle. Let's get it done, even if we have to overpay. Same with wide receiver. I don't think that's going to be the case when it opens next month. And that's going to be interesting to see who they target.
Yeah, it's going to be the Wild Wild West. I just know that with all the money that's being thrown at all these SEC schools. He is Zac Blackerby, Locked On Auburn. Of course, Chris Gordy here, Locked On SEC. Zac, happy holidays to you and yours, and thanks for the time.
Yeah, Merry Christmas, buddy.